All right, everybody, welcome back. Today we are talking about sprinting and how to get faster. This was asked by a close friend of mine. Uh, kind of just wanted for me to lay out the basics and a firm layout of how to get faster. That's exactly what we're going to do. First, we're going to start with the basics, which can be not that basic, but I did my best to kind of dumb them down. And they vary from physics to just basic physiological structure. And then we go into our gym work, how we can get faster through strength and conditioning, so in the gym with weights, and then how to train when you're actually sprinting. So we got three kind of basic sections. I hope I can lay this out clearly. As always, reach out with any questions you may have. I'm going to do my best. I may These points may become a little convoluted as we go on, and it is a little messy up here, but we're going to do our best going through this. All right, so sprinting, the basics of sprinting. We know sprinting is getting from point A to point B as fast as possible. So we have to build up speed and then maintain speed. And as we do that, that is expressing extreme forces very, very quickly. I forget where I saw this. I can't cite it properly, but it was something like when you are sprinting, when you're using that one leg and propelling yourself forward, you can see forces 7 to 9 times greater than your body weight just on one leg. So we have high amounts of forces, and of course, it's happening very quickly. Even if you're not a fast sprinter, it's still happening. Each leg's going down and coming back up in tenths of a second. And that leads us into impulse. Impulse is a physics term, and it basically is saying it is the amount of force you're applying in a period of time. So it is the area under the force time graph, and we are displaying high amounts of impulse as we sprint. That is a big point when we get to creating high force capability in the gym. So keep that in mind. Another huge point when we're talking about sprinting is the stretch shortening cycle. The stretch shortening cycle is a concept that is involved in all plyometrics. It is basically when you are running or jumping, your tendon stretches when you land, and then it compresses when you go up. And that you can think of it like a spring right here, this wave part. That is a spring that compresses and then or recoils and then expands and gives us more energy. And that leads us to the Hill model, which is just a model of the muscle tissue, the musculotendinous unit. So we have our contractile element, which is our muscle, and we have our PEC, our parallel elastic component, and our SEC, our series elastic component. So our CE, our contractile element, which is our muscle, try and keep up. It contracts like your muscles do. They contract and they create force, and they send it to the SEC. It recoils and then expands and sends it back, and we get force. And we express that force on the track in the gym when you're jumping. So that's kind of the basic unit of how our muscles and tendons interplay. Huge concept there. That kind of couples with Newton's third law. Newton's third law is every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So as we do plyometrics on the ground or sprint or jump, whatever, we give force into the ground. Through this is how we create the force at a basic level. And the ground pushes us back. So that is how we move. That is how, in physics terms, we interact with the ground and how we move. So that's important because we have to be able to provide the force into the ground and it gives us back force. And then we have orientation of said force. Um, we have horizontal forces and vertical forces. Horizontal forces are mostly they are there throughout the whole sprint, but we build them up in the acceleration phase. So like the first 10 to 20 yards. And then that kind of turns into vertical force as we get more upright, so past like the 20-yard mark. That gets a little tricky and convoluted, but kind of important as we look at sprinting. You can see that when people are sprinting, really good sprinters, they stay very horizontal in the beginning phases of the sprint. So you can see my little figure here. He, she, they are in a kind of a more horizontal projection, and they are pushing themselves down the track. But as we get further down the track in our max velocity phase, we get more upright, and we're propelling through more vertical forces. But there's still horizontal force there. We still have to move in that direction. Sprinting is a complex task. It is multifactorial. There are a lot of different factors that go into this, which makes the process very difficult if you want to look at them all. But it's really not that complex if we boil it down to the main things that matter. But I mean, just to go over a couple of the factors that could play a role, we have hormonal responses. We have the stretch shortening cycle. We have impulse. We have even sleep can affect it. An important point is sometimes small changes can create big, or small factors can create big changes, but that is a video for another day. And then sprinting, of course, is a plyometric. It is probably the plyometric. It is the most intense plyometric you can probably do, besides a very tall or very high depth jump, but nevertheless. So sprinting is plyometric. It is multifactorial. It's complex. We have to orient our force. And first, we have to provide force. It is provided or created through the contractile element and the series elastic component and the parallel elastic component, all creating that energy and using it. And of course, frankly, the most important thing, it is expressing extreme amounts of force very, very quickly. So, all that said and done, if you're not really a coach or don't really care about that part, forget all that. We're going to go into how you can actually get faster. So, in the gym, I like to separate it or kind of silo it. In the gym, we like to create our high force capability. So you can do that on the track, but the gym, the main goal is to really create that foundation for force production. And how we do that is mostly the big lifts. So we have squats, RDLs, deadlifts, whatever big lift you want to think of, Olympic lifts, whatever. These can all help us provide or create that high force capability. And basically, that is just our muscles producing force against a weight, and we push the weight up. And that is going to just level up our body and allow us to produce more force and more force and more force. But that doesn't mean anything if we don't learn to express that force properly on the track or on the field, wherever. Another way to prepare yourself for sprinting in the gym is just prepare your tissues in a very basic manner. Basically, you have your hamstrings, hip flexors, calves. There's many, many more. Just 3 ones I wanted to touch on, barely. But this is more just kind of hitting those certain muscles, creating those physiological, those structural adaptations so that they're ready to encounter these forces and create these forces on the track. And also just health and robustness. So that's another big one as well. And then another way to prepare is preparing your central nervous system. Sprinting is a very high nervous system task. It requires a lot of activation from the central nervous system. So we have high rate coding, the ability to produce a lot of inputs, and it also we have to recruit high threshold motor units, which you do from those big lifts. We can also do that through overcoming ISOs, which if you don't know what that is, you can kind of look it up. But it is just an example would be setting up the crash bars, having the bar under it, and pulling really, really hard. So trying to overcome a force that cannot be moved. And that is a good way to switch on that central nervous system. Finally, in the gym, this is kind of a gray middle ground or gray area. You can also do this on the track, but I just grouped it here. So in plyometrics, we know that that involves a stretch shortening cycle, and this is just refining and improving our stretch shortening cycle. We do this by doing bounds, which is just an exaggerated sprint, broad jumps, pogos, depth jumps, all these different things. This is not the talk to talk about exercise selection, but this is a way to help improve your elastic capability, which is going to help this unit, the musculotendinous unit. So I think we're all good there. Create high force, prepare the tissues, prepare the central nervous system, prepare the elastic tissues or the tendons. All right. Most important part of the video, if you are just here to learn how to get fast, it's pretty simple. Really don't overcomplicate it. That can make it seem complicated. That's more so for education of coaches and myself. But this is really where the gold is. So, like I said, we create high force capability. Then we learn to express that force through sprinting. That's basically it. So there's 3 different kind of ways to separate sprinting. We have our max velocity work, tempo work, which is almost grouped in with max velocity work. It's going to assist that, but it is not the same thing. And our acceleration work. So our max velocity work, we want to hit max velocity 1 to 2 times a week. We have to hit it at least once. If you're not hitting max velocity, you are not sprinting. You are not training max velocity. And that goes in with the SAID principle. We have to touch max velo. We have to impose specific demands to elicit specific adaptations. Okay? And we want to go over 40 yards. The 40-yard, most people equate that with the gold standard of speed, but most athletes, most developed athletes that are in a high level of sport or even pretty amateur level of sport are going to need more than 40 yards to hit max velo. So if you're just going and running 40 yards and thinking you're touching max velo, maybe run some tests, see if your 10-yard fly is faster after 40 yards. We have to make sure we're hitting that max velo. And the 40-yard oftentimes is not the best metric. So go run 50 yards, go run 60 yards. Just make sure you're not overdoing it, but make sure you're not underdoing it too. And when we're doing max velo, when we get to that max velocity phase, we want to be smooth. We don't want to be straining too hard. We want to be being smooth in our movements and relaxed in that phase. But that's not too important in this video. And of course, with max velocity, we're going to have shorter ground contact times, which isn't that important in this phase right now. But another way to kind of to assist that max velocity work is tempo work. Something I probably haven't done enough in my career and sprint training. This is going to help us with structural adaptations. Tempo work is just higher repetition sprinting. So you're going to do more of them in a session. I should mention in max velocity, you're probably only going to be able to do 3 to 4 reps at max velocity in this session. But with tempo work, we're going at about 80, 90, even 95% of a sprint. But we're going for structural adaptations and fitness or capacity. So we're building that capacity. We're building structural adaptations to allow us to do more max velo work later on. And this is also just a fantastic thing to do because you can't touch max velo that often without frying your central nervous system in a week. So tempo work can help us assist in that max velocity work. Finally, hope you stayed with me. Last point, we have acceleration. Acceleration, you can do more accelerations in a session because they are shorter. So you're going 10 to 20 yards and you are working on that technique, staying in that horizontal projection and pushing yourself down the track. Good way to work on technique is sleds or pushing up against something. Talk for another time. And it's a horizontal force and longer ground contact time, so you're producing more force in that phase, or longer ground contact times to propel yourself forward. It's not always more force or more impulse, and we want to be aggressive in this stage. All right, I think I covered just about everything, but if you're only paying attention right now, to get faster, create high force capability in the gym, learn to express that force through max velocity work, some tempo work to help that max velocity, and do your accelerations. All right, go get fast.